Hi, I'm Bianca with CraftyGirlsCricut.com, and today I have a beautiful Faith and Wine tumbler project for you. And I can't wait to show you how easy this is. I am going to be using shimmer vinyl and black glossy permanent vinyl. Now let's get started. So you're going to start by getting your black vinyl or whatever color vinyl you're going to use for the and wine portion. And we're going to go ahead and cut to size. So my image is going to be 2 by 1.5. So to be sure I have enough, I'm going to cut 3 by 2. Because you don't want to run out of material when your Cricut's cutting. And when it cuts, it tends to start about 1/4 inch down. So if you don't make sure that there's enough, if you only cut it exactly to the size of your image, you're going to end up potentially having a bunch that is not on your vinyl, which is not great, because then you have to recut it and you've wasted a bunch of vinyl. Or your image is missing part of it. So I've cut my little piece. Now I'll show you where a Cricut often starts. So Cricut often will do something similar to this. You'll notice once it's cut out, it usually ends up going in that much. So you want to make sure that when you put your material up in the corner, that you have that extra here. As you can see, I went a little bit over 2 and a little bit over the 3 to kind of compensate for that excess. You don't want to move your material down because you're not always sure exactly where Cricut will start. So it's absolutely best to start right along the line with your material, but to always make sure you get a little extra than you think you're going to need. So after that, you're just going to push down and let's see, not sure what I did with that. Just apply some pressure to make sure that it has adhered to your mat, and then you're simply going to enter it, making sure that your mat is under each little lip here, and then you're going to give it just a slight pressure with your thumb to make sure that it's up against your rollers. Then you're going to select load, and when the button says you're ready to go, you're going to select start. So now that you have cut everything out, you're going to flip your mat, lift, and go ahead and put your finger down like this to keep this from curling. And that will just help your vinyl to keep from doing any more curling than it already has naturally from being on the roll. I'm going to go ahead and cut off this excess. I'll probably use it for another project since it's quite substantial size. As you can see, it's pretty much as I used for this, so I'll put it in my scrap box for another project. Now I'm just going to stick my weeder right in the corner and get between these 2 layers. And then I'm going to grab it and pull up carefully to make sure that I don't accidentally rip off part of my design. And I'm just going to use this weeder to make sure that all these delicate pieces stay where they're supposed to. When I go ahead and lift this outer edge. And so if you can see what I'm doing, I'm actually just poking my weeder through and kind of holding down this corner to make sure it doesn't lift with this excess vinyl. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to keep pulling. Oop, there we go. So I'm going to come from this side and I'm going to go ahead and sit the tip of my weeder right on that eye. And make sure you can see what I'm doing though. Okay, zoom in. So I zoomed in for you. I'm going to take the tip of my weeder and set it right on this edge of the eye and poke it right through. So just like that. So you see how it just pokes right through, and it just holds the edges of the eye down to keep it from ripping and from getting caught in this excess that I'm pulling off. And it just helps keep the integrity of the overall structure of the eye as well, so it doesn't allow this to rip either. So I'm just going to keep gently pulling, basically repeating the exact same process with all these little edges, since the font I chose have these little tails and they're pretty delicate. And then if one does curl up a little bit, I like to just run the back side of my weeder right along nice and gentle, because you don't want to press really hard because it will actually cut the vinyl if it's thin vinyl like this. So just gently, with hardly any pressure, just set it down like this, just set it down and roll across. That's all. Hardly pressing at all, just to re-adhere it to the mat and flatten it out. Then I'm going to go ahead and just run my weeder right along the letter N, and you can see that it allowed that to come right off. Now, because again this font has this little edge on each of the feet, I have to repeat that same process just to keep all these little edges from getting ripped off or bent. Then I'm going to repeat the same process here. I'm going to put my weeder right on this edge of the E so that when I pull, it keeps that edge nice and intact. Then I'm going to do this hoop. I'm going to kind of hook it underneath and turn. And what that's going to do is peel that right up. That way this doesn't get ripped and this doesn't get ripped. And there we go. Now it's mostly weeded. Now I just have to go back through and get all these little tiny bits. And when they're like this, I actually like to just stick it in and pull. I'm not even gonna mess with the edges. When they're about this size, it's big enough that I can just pierce it and pull it right up. Now, of course, you want to be careful. You don't want to rip your design if it's not been cut properly, but I went ahead and made sure that it was cut with more pressure in my settings. And I can tell by removing this exterior vinyl that it's been cut properly. So I was able to easily execute that pierce and pull. If it hadn't been cut properly and you did a pierce and pull, you could really risk ripping these edges or stretching your vinyl. So if you're going to do a pierce and pull like I just did, make sure you're already aware that it has been cut well and cut through. That's just a disclaimer. So now we're ready to move on to the next part. I'm going to go ahead and weed the word faith now. I'm going to do the same exact method. I'm going to kind of hold down this corner. Sorry about my nails, guys. They were all pretty. And then I did a bunch of dishes. Yeah, mom life. And they got destroyed. Such is life. So I'm going to do the same thing. Hook and turn. Then I'm going to go ahead and hold this down and run. As you can see, it's kind of coming up because this one didn't get cut as well. It's a little bit thicker vinyl. Actually, it's a lot thicker vinyl. And see, if I try to do the pierce and pull, you can see the whole thing comes up. So instead, the next technique I'm going to use is I'm actually just going to separate it. I'm going to use my finger to hold this little corner, and then I'm going to run little by little, run my weeder right around the edge, because obviously it did not cut it out well. I'm just going to run my weeder right along and essentially cut and sever this edge from my design. And I want to be very delicate because you don't want to end up having a really rough, stretched, torn up design line. So I do want to do this with caution. So as you can see, I'm just kind of going back and forth real gentle to help it separate without bending or ripping my design. And so there we go. Now that I've got that, I'm just going to slowly keep peeling it. This has a really little delicate tail, so I'm going to do that same method I showed you before, where I stick it through and it just helps hold it down. And then I'm going to do that same flattening method as well. So I'm just going to slowly, bit by bit, I'll fast forward this so that you don't have to sit through the entire weeding process. If you have any questions about weeding, please leave them in the description below. And if you have a video you would like me to make about weeding, if you have any questions, you want some clarification, or if you want more tips on weeding, please go ahead and leave those ideas and suggestions in the description below. I'm always happy to hear what my subscribers want to see. I'm happy to make things that you guys are interested in. So if you want some tutorials about weeding or designs, go ahead and leave them in the description below, and I'll see what I can do about making videos on them. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed making this craft today. And if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the links below. Until next time, keep crafting.